I really want to have some fun at church this morning because you're allowed to have fun at church. That is allowed. So you think the kids who go upstairs they have fun? They don't know nothing. They don't know anything. So today I'm going to talk to you from one of my favourite stories from the Bible. And I always hesitate to call something from the Bible a story because I guess in my mind the word story means something that's made up. But like this stuff actually happened. All those miracles, they actually happened. All of the war and the fighting and the walls falling down, that actually happened. All of like the raising from the dead, that actually happened a couple of times. So let's start again. Today I'm talking to you from one of my favourite truths from the Bible. Because that's better. Now the reason this is one of my favourites is because if you know anything about me, you know I like going to the cinema. I'm a bit of a movie buff. And we all know that the best movies, at least in my eyes, are the ones with loads of action. The ones that have like a relationship going through the middle. The ones where there's ups and downs and there's loads of stuff going on really. And this which I'm about to read kind of hits all those boxes. It's got everything. It's got action. It's got relationship. It's got a big water fight going on somewhere. What more could you want on a Sunday morning? So if you're taking notes and if you'll see it in your outline, it's in Luke chapter 8, verses 22 to 25. So it goes like this. One day, Jesus said to his disciples, "Let us go over to the other side of the lake." So they got in the boat and set out. As they sailed, he fell asleep. I can relate to Jesus there, falling asleep. A squall came down on the lake so that the boat was being swamped, and they were in great danger. The disciples went and woke him, saying, "Master, Master, we're going to drown." If you look in a different translation of this, the disciples screamed, "We're going to die." Like when you kind of wake up and you're a little bit drowsy, you don't really know what's going on. Imagine that, and one of your best mates comes up to you screaming, "We're going to die." So carrying on, what did Jesus do? He got up and rebuked the wind and the raging waters, and the storm subsided and all was calm. "Where is your faith?" he asked his disciples. In fear and amazement, they asked one another, "Who is this? He commands even the winds and the water, and they obey him." So when Ollie asked me to preach this morning, I asked if there was anything specific he kind of wanted me to preach on. And his response was really narrow-minded. It kind of put me into a box. I quote, "Whatever you want, really." Cheers, Ollie. So I worked it out the other day, and it's been just over a year since I was last up here preaching. And let me tell you, a lot has happened in that time. So I thought I'd take this opportunity to kind of talk you through some of those changes, if you don't mind. You haven't really got an option, so okay. So I don't read very often, but for my birthday, Ollie and Rach bought me this book called Fearfully Made. And it talks about these 5 social fears that are kind of really prevalent in our society today, mainly within like the sort of the younger generations. And I was reading it, and when I first started, I thought it was really interesting, but it kind of wasn't really relevant to my life. I couldn't really sort of see the parallels. But as I kind of read a little bit and then got on with my life and then read another bit and then read another bit, I kind of saw these fears playing themselves out in my life. And to be honest with you, ironically, I got pretty scared. And I kind of felt like I was losing control a little bit. I wonder if any of you can kind of relate to that. So I've called my talk today, "The Winds and the Waves." You probably saw it. It's on your notice sheet. And the reason I've called it that is because in that moment, that describes perfectly how I felt. I felt like I was kind of being blown around by the winds. And for the next few days, I was up and down like the waves. Didn't really have any control. Kind of like there was this kind of battle going on in my head. On one moment, I was like really, really felt lonely. Kind of I didn't have anyone. And then the next moment, I felt like I didn't really have a place or a purpose. And this battle was going on, this argument in my head saying, because like one side was this affirmation, this thinking saying, like, "Jake, you don't need to be scared because you've got this amazing family, you've got some great friends, and you've got a God who loves you loads." But then on the other side, I felt this kind of overwhelming fear. The three I want to talk about is loneliness, rejection, and failure. Those are the 3 fears that I kind of felt playing themselves out in my life. So the first one's loneliness. For those of you who don't know, kind of a big change that's happened in my life in the past year or so is exiting out of a 2-year relationship. So in this time, obviously, there were tons of really good times, but for the last few months, it got really tough. And good because it was like this massive weight was being lifted off my shoulders. But at the same time, it'd been so long since I was single, I kind of didn't know where I fitted. And I didn't know what to do. So naturally, when you leave a relationship, you crave another one. So I tried online dating. Don't know if you've heard of it. Something called Tinder. So Tinder is a horrible concept, really. It's basically you judge people purely on how they look and completely ignore the things like personality and interests, like the important stuff. And I remember a talk that Joe gave a couple of months ago, a little while ago, and he said, why do we try to fill deep holes with shallow things? And that's exactly what Tinder does. It kind of gives you this really short-term fulfillment when you find out that someone likes you, but then it quickly goes away. So nevertheless, I matched with this lovely girl called Charlotte. We started chatting and we ended up going on a date. It went really well, so we arranged another. And being the gentleman, I planned this perfect date, ready? We were going to go to Nando's and then go to the cinema. What more could you want? There we go. So what worked throughout the day, I was getting pretty nervous, as you do. And around lunchtime, I received the text from my mum. She's over there. And it said this. Ready? Hey, Jake, me and Tony are off to the cinema tonight and wondered if you wanted to join. Okay. So my heart dropped. And as you can imagine, I really quickly replied this. I'm busy this evening. But out of interest, what are you seeing and at what time? To which she replied, you're going on a date, aren't you? Terrible. But not to worry, I could just kind of avoid eye contact and pretend I didn't know them, sort of thing. So I got to Nando's and we were having this meal. It went really well. We got to the end of the meal and I nipped to the toilet quickly before we left. And as I was in the toilet, I saw a notification on my phone from my sister. She'd sent a video into the family group chat we've got. So I opened it up, kind of, what's this? And it turns out it was a video of me filmed from the other side of Nando's where my sister was absolutely roaring with laughter. So I quickly ran downstairs, grabbed Charlotte, I kind of glanced across the room, saw my sister in hysterics, absolutely ruined. So we quickly made our way out. And to top it all off, I then had to spend the next 2 hours pretending I didn't know my mum. Safe to say, I've not been on another date since. But the reason I'm telling you this isn't just because I want to embarrass myself, but because it's a perfect example of how having that feeling of loneliness can drive you to kind of unfortunate circumstances. So taking a look at what I read earlier, you can see what the disciples did when they were alone and afraid. So they said this, the disciples went and woke him saying, Master, Master, we're going to drown. See, that's exactly what I should have done. And that's exactly what you should do if you ever find yourself in a similar situation. If you're ever helpless or afraid or lonely, you need to run to the place that you can trust. The one place where you can trust to be firm and stable. And that's Jesus. Or failing Jesus, you can run to someone in your life whose advice and wisdom you really trust. Because they can kind of help you figure things out rationally. So some of you might have noticed this box. And I'm going to need an example, a kind of a volunteer. And the good thing about being a youth leader is the youth have to do what you say. So Dan, come here. So I was kind of hoping, give a round of applause for Dan. Come on, there we go. So Dan's one of our new youth. He's been coming a couple of months now. And I was going to try and use one of the really scaredy cat girls, but none of them turned up today. So I chose you instead. You're kind of a fitting replacement. What I want you to do is there's a prize inside this box. It's a little chocolate bar for you. But naturally, that's not the only thing that's in there. So what I'm going to ask you to do is look that way and then put your hand in the box. And you're kind of going to have to feel around and find this chocolate bar, this treat. Ready? Oh, my goodness. Steady. Ready, go. Just do it. Just put it in. It's not going to hurt you, I promise. Do you trust me?
No.
Do it. What do you feel? Well, just do it.
I felt something in there.
What's in there? It's a chocolate bar.
Yeah, but there's something else.
Yeah, there is something else.
What?
Do it. It's not going to hurt you, I promise.
I don't trust you.
Just do it.
I don't even think there is a chocolate bar.
There is, I promise.
You put your hand in there.
Your turn.
Yeah, but you know what's in there.
I do.
Yeah,
Just do it. You can't look in there. Stop it. Right, but just do it. I promise you, it's not going to hurt you.
it's dark.
It's dark. It is dark.
Yeah,
Grab
no,
it.
but what is that?
Find the chocolate bar.
It's a doll.
Put it in your hand. Find the chocolate bar.
It's a doll.
There you go. Round of applause for Dan. It's actually a teddy. This is my toy dog. So the idea of that is just kind of an example of how we can kind of overcome our fears. So now I'm going to talk you through this second fear that I kind of felt in my life. And that's the fear of rejection. It kind of felt like it was holding on to me. Now, funnily enough, I don't think this came from the fact that I was now alone and single, but more the fact that now I was on my own. I didn't really know where I fitted. So my fear of rejection came from this lack of identity. So I read a book recently. Remember earlier when I said I don't really read? Apparently that's a big lie. So this book was on the basics of preaching in church. It's kind of preaching for dummies, if you will. And it said that a great talk will generally have some kind of research, some facts and figures to back up what you're saying. And so I did some digging, and there's tons of research into this word identity. But one in particular caught my eye because it used this verse as the backbone. So it's in 1 Peter 2, verse 9, and it says, "But you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession." So first of all, you're chosen by God. That means that out of everyone in the entire world, he chose you. So the reason someone gets chosen for a job, for example, is because they have really unique skills and abilities that make them the perfect candidate. And God has given you beautiful talents and abilities that make you perfect for at least one thing, and that's being his child. That's being part of this family. You're perfect for that. Next up, in his eyes, you and me are royal. That means he treats us like kings and queens. So I was looking at some of the powers that the Queen has, some weird and wonderful powers. Did you know, for example, the Queen doesn't have to have a driving license to drive a car? Neither does she have to have a registration plate on her car. And my favourite one is the fact that she doesn't need a passport, but instead it's tradition that she just waves some money around that has her face on when she goes through the border security. So he treats you like royalty. The next one, God says we are holy, which if you look up the dictionary definition of this word holy, it literally means with a purpose. And then finally, you're God's special possession. So I don't know about you, but when I was younger, I had a soft toy. And his name's Snowball, if you were wondering, this is him. And I would do absolutely anything for this little toy. My family will tell you it came on absolutely every single family holiday, and I never slept without it by my side. It was my special possession. You can tell I just lobbed it on the floor. So you are God's Snowball. Sounds a bit weird. You are God's special possession. He cares about you. He has time for you. And he would give absolutely anything to keep you safe. And when the world's against you, that fact can really, really help you out. God won't let anything harm you or hurt you. And even if it does, he'll use it to grow you and build you up. But my favourite part about that verse is the third one we touched on, the holy nation. So like I said, that literally means we've got a purpose. And that's kind of what I was lacking earlier when I was telling that story. Towards the end of last year, I sort of started taking on some of the responsibilities of the youth, being the youth leader here at Kingfisher. And I told this story a few months ago in the evening service. But basically, on Friday nights, if you don't know, we run our youth group, and really creatively called 180 Friday. And this particular evening was really, really tough. It kind of felt like everything was going wrong. All of the youth had stupid amounts of energy. I'd like to take this opportunity to ask parents not to feed their children 17 spoons of sugar before they give them to us for a few hours. And in particular, this really night, I remember walking down the corridor over there, and I was kind of thinking to myself, why am I here? Is it really, really worth the hardship, worth all the stress that it causes me? But then one of the new posters caught my eye, and it said the word challenge. And I was like, oh God, good joke. And then to the left of it, it said the word purpose. God has this incredible purpose for your life, an incredible plan that goes above and beyond anything you could ever imagine. Therefore, I challenge you this morning, if you haven't already, to find that purpose, because everyone's got one. So maybe try serving in some different ministry groups, try serving around church. You're more than welcome to join us in youth. I must admit, the story I've just told you probably didn't sell it very much, but I promise you we do have loads and loads of fun. So the third social fear that I want to touch on, I mentioned it earlier, that kind of felt like it had this grip on me, is the fear of failure. So it wouldn't be a Jake Blagden talk if I didn't mention my job at least once. So I absolutely love my job, and the reason I know that is because it genuinely doesn't feel like I'm at work most of the time. And so I've been doing it for nearly 3 years now, and kind of as you can imagine, when you get further into a job, you get more and more responsibility, which is great because it gives you loads of opportunities to show your worth. But it also means there's more opportunities to mess up on things. So the reason having loads of more responsibilities really screws me over is because I like I like things to be done properly and perfectly. I don't know if any of you are like that. And that's where my fear of failure comes from. So the fear of failure can do two things to you. It either makes you really disturbed or it can really, really inhibit you. Let me explain. So you feel really disturbed because whenever you do something, whenever you perform a task, there's always that little voice in the back of your head that says, what if it's not right? What if you've messed up a little bit? And then it can really inhibit you because you're scared to even start the task, let alone finish it, because you might mess it up. So I think the disciples had a fear of failure when they were on that boat. Because I don't know about you, but I'd say shipwrecking is a bit of a fail. But how did Jesus address this? So in verse 25, he says this. Where is your faith? Where is your faith? It all boiled down to the disciples trusting that they had someone who was in ultimate control of all their surroundings. And the same can be said for us. So the next time you kind of doubt yourself before or after a task, remember you've got Jesus who has everything under control. He can calm all of your surroundings. All you need to do is trust in him and have faith in him. And all those fears can be alleviated. An interesting point that this book I talked about earlier makes, that Ollie Rach brought me, is the difference between a physical fear and a social fear. So physical fears are really rational. They make sense. They're there for a reason. For example, raise your hand if you're afraid of spiders. See, that makes sense because there are some spiders in the world who can kill you. Raise your hand if you're afraid of heights. See, that makes sense as well because that can kill you, yeah. Gladly, I'm not afraid of heights, you know. But but social fears, on the other hand, they're not really rational. They're kind of 100% fabricated in our minds. Yes, kind of bad experiences can attribute to them a little bit, but ultimately, it's all in our heads. I mean, you could argue the same about physical fears. For example, so my brother, he's trying to teach my little nephew Bradley at the moment about spiders. And he goes from one extreme to the other. So on one day, he'll see a little bit of fluff on the floor and sprint in the other direction. And then on the other day, he'll see a bit of fluff on the floor and go and try and eat it. I'm not quite sure what's going on in his brain. But the fact remains, fears can be learned. Therefore, fears can be unlearned. And I think I've figured something out that can kind of help us with this. I say I've figured it out. It's in the Bible, so it's been around for a couple of years. So the really cool thing about the Gospels, so Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, is the fact that they can tell the same story but from different perspectives. And that helps you kind of catch things. So maybe Mark might write something that Matthew missed. And it can draw our attention to really, really certain things. So the version I read was from Luke of this story. But he missed something, but don't worry, because my mate Mark was on the ball that day. And so if you look at Mark chapter 4, verse 36, it says this. Leaving the crowd behind, they took him along just as he was in the boat. And this bit's the key bit that Luke missed. There were also other boats with him. So they weren't the only boat on that lake on that morning. In the winds and the waves, I guarantee that the disciples didn't take the time to look around and see the other boats. Because even if they did, the fog and the splashing and the waves probably wouldn't even let them see them. And but I'm sure if they did know that they weren't the only one in that boat, if you pardon the pun, they'd kind of be a little bit less fearful. And I think that's so true in our lives. In all the commotion, it's so easy to be really narrow-minded, to kind of have your blinkers on. But the key to overcoming fear is knowing that there are others in the same boat. That way, you can not only get rid of the fear of loneliness, because you know you're not alone, but you can also get support from others, from other people's experiences, and you can also share your experiences to help them. It's kind of mutually beneficial. And so that's really key. That's kind of something I really want you to take away from today. The people around you have a really, really big impact on you, and having the right people around you is really important because they're there. You can talk to them, you can get advice from them, and I think that'll make life a whole lot easier. So to recap for you. Whenever you feel alone, whenever you feel afraid, the best thing to do is turn to Jesus, just as the disciples did. Because he's the only one who can really calm you down and the only one who can give you advice that's really, really meaningful. Also, he's never not there. And knowing that fact's been really, really key in my life. So whenever I get scared or afraid, I know that the guy who literally created the world, who created me, and knows everything that will ever happen to me, is right by my side. He never leaves me. I've got that communication with him the whole time. God's like a bit like a cheat sheet for life, if you will. So the other thing is, you're God's special possession. You're God's snowball. And he calls us holy. This means that he's going to protect us, and he's always going to have you by his side. And the fact that he calls us holy means we've got a purpose. Whether you found it or not, you don't need to be worried, because that is there. And your talents and skills, they're unique to you, and they make you perfect for that job. And then finally, if you take a look around, look at the people you're with, because it can be really mutually beneficial when you're with the right ones. And they can kind of teach you things, and you can share your experiences, and they can share their experiences. And taking a look at the people in your life can also be really eye-opening for you. It's something that I really struggle with in my life, because I kind of look around at the people. Are they the best people I'm to be with? Are they having a really positive impact on my life? Yes or no? And that is something I grapple with now, but I'm going to overcome it because I've got a Jesus who can give me the best advice possible. So if it's okay, if the band starts to come back up, I know I've kind of rushed through it, but I'd really like to pray with you, if that's okay. Pray for you as well. So Lord, I really just thank you that you never ever leave our sides. In a world where it's so easy to be scared, where it's so easy to be afraid, that's kind of our default setting. I really pray that you can be with us and you can remind us that we don't need to be scared. We've got a purpose, and we're perfect for that purpose, because that's how you made us, Lord. And I really pray that all these people, as they go into their weeks and months and years, that they would just remember that, and they'd go through life not being scared, not being worried, not being alone, not being afraid, but instead knowing that you're with them, you're by their side, and you're going to keep them safe, Lord. Amen.